Welcome to this session of the EOSC Governance Symposium 2020. My name is Bob Jones, and I'm going to be your chair for this session, which is about the co-creation, main outputs and contributions to EOSC from the EOSC Secretariat. This is the first in a series of 4 sessions, one each afternoon through the week, where we will be highlighting some of the work done by the proposals submitted and funded via the co-creation activities of the EOSC Secretariat, and highlight what impact these are having on the formation and development of the European Open Science Cloud. Before doing that, I'd like to start by explaining to you a little bit what is the co-creation activity of the Secretariat. So if I can have the next slide, please. So the co-creation budget is part of the EC funded activities of the EOSC Secretariat project, and essentially was to give some flexibility to allow EOSC to develop with small targeted activities that could help to different areas of the development of the whole European Open Science Cloud. And at the bottom, you can see the types of activities that are have been funded, sort of engagement with the stakeholders, different initiatives or possible synergies with other initiatives. Support services for the working groups. You saw some of those this morning with representatives of the executive board. Analysis and studies to support EOSC in practice and its development. We'll see some examples as well of that this afternoon. And helping the EOSC board and executive board directly, as well as communication and outreach and stakeholder events and forums. Okay, next slide, please. So it's organized as a sort of budget where people can submit proposals. So anyone who's an individual, natural person, legal entities in the member states of the European Union and the associated countries could apply. But they can only do that and request funds if those activities that are proposing are not already supported via other instruments, be those national or by the European Union, or other projects which are ongoing, so to speak. Okay, so we should avoid duplication. What sort of application and valuation criteria have been used? So of course the eligibility that we just talked about for Horizon 2020, and those activities and actions which are related to the work of the Secretariat to support the governance, in particular the work of the Executive Board working groups, the Governance Board subgroups, and the Stakeholder Forum. And they have to represent a clear added value to the existing EOSC activities and show some benefits in terms of the key performance indicators that lead towards the measurement and the gains to be achieved by the European Open Science Cloud. Next slide, please. This quickly shows you the process where the applications are submitted online. They're initially reviewed by the Technical University of Vienna, who look after this whole process, and the Technopolis group. They go through the different working groups of the Secretariat, and they consult as well with the executive board members and working groups when necessary to determine the usefulness of them. And if they're approved, there's a contract set up between Technopolis and the proposers, and the work commences and so on. So overall, that whole process takes approximately 1 month for the review. Next slide, please. Just give you an overview of what's happened so far. In 2019, there were 21 approved proposals which have been functioning, and many of them have concluded. 2020, there were 27 proposals, and we also in 2020 operated a COVID-19 special funding call related to developments that could assist in the response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that had 65 funded calls. You can see the list of all the approved proposals and activities at the link there, and there is still the possibility to submit proposals on the condition that they complete by March 2021. Okay, so with that brief introduction, let's move on now and look at some of the studies and activities that have generated impact for the European Open Science Cloud. And I'd like to start by asking Fabrizio Sechi from AON to talk about or tell us the work that he performed and his company performed in the analysis to support the strengthening of the European Open Science Cloud risk governance. Please, Fabrizio, over to you.
Thank you so much, Bob. Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Fabrizio Sechi. I'm the Deputy Head of Consulting for EON Advisory and Solution. Firstly, I would like to formally thank the organizer of the EOSC Executive Board and the EOSC Secretariat for giving us the opportunity to present today the main results of the study commissioned by the EOSC Secretariat Open Call and developed with the support of the EOSC Sustainability Working Group. Thank you so much for the slide. This study had the aim to support the current and future EOSC risk governance through the implementation of an effective enterprise risk management. So just a few words about us. Our advisory solution, we can go ahead to the next slide, please, if it's possible. Our advisory and solution is the Italian branch of the EON PLC, dedicated in consultancy services on risk management and risk opportunity management for the public and private sector. We are part of the network of the EON risk consultants in EMEA and in the world. And our challenge is to support our customers like you in developing, announcing, and managing their risk and opportunities by delivering tailor-made solutions, both in risk governance and risk assessment. Only in the last 2 years, we provided in EMEA more than 1,500 advisory services to different kinds of customers like SME, large industrial financial groups, and public bodies with customized solution. About the research and innovation, the study is one of the examples of how the Italian team of the EON is actively involved in the research field. EON Italy, in fact, has a main partner in 6 research projects funded by the Horizon 2020 program. And many of the projects are involved in also in cybersecurity threats. In fact, one of the recommendations that we can anticipate now, and we would have that we included, was the establishment of an operational security team should be included in future EOSC project to mitigate the major security incident, but we can discuss in the next second about it. Can we go to the next slide, please? Focusing the study we are presenting now, and we all of us know that moving towards 2021 and implementation phase, EOSC recognized that the need to include in its structure a risk management dimension in order to support development of the initiative and the targets achievement, and the definition of the most relevant need in terms of risk management is urgent. Looking to the context, the European Open Science Cloud initiative has a multiple factor of complexity in its governance, including organizational model, transnationality, cross-disciplinary usership. Sorry, just a moment. And all these factors might lead to a significant number of risks. The initiative, as well as you are aware of, is currently experiencing a transition stage by approaching the second phase of development, as well as consolidating the governing bodies that will guide the association. Moreover, being a pan-European federation of data infrastructure cannot fail in managing emerging risks and important changes that are triggered by the complexity of all the system. In face of this environment, we produced a dedicated study on risk governance, ensuring the expert third-party viewpoint as objective as possible and quantitative as possible. The study obtained 3 main results. The preliminary analysis of the maturity level of the EOSC governance, the assessment of the macro areas of risk that may affect EOSC after 2020, the next steps. The development of an adequate and reasoned guidance on how to move forward in structuring the EOSC risk management governance and face the main risk. Please, next slide. So, regarding the activities performed in the last month, we have the roadmap we followed. Among them, the most relevant we think that are the analysis of the more than 20 documents, reports, and presentation officially produced by EOSC, as well as the outcomes of the last EOSC consultation day, at which we are pleased to have attended. A set of 14 interviews from representatives covering a wide area of EOS stakeholder perspective, and selected for representing a various mix of several dimensions, for instance, competence area, cultural awareness, nationality, and stakeholder groups. We would like to take the opportunity to especially thank all the EOSC stakeholder we interacted with during the study for their very valuable and active contribution and insight throughput. Many thanks again. Thank you so much. The development of a customized framework was developed to evaluate the EOSC risk governance and the higher level risks, and we processed all the information in order to develop the risk management guidelines that we can see in the next slide. Going to the results, I think yes, thank you so much. First of all, we would like to spend some seconds and sometimes about the gap analysis. When we talk about risk governance, basically we are answering to two questions. How is the entity organized to managing the risk? And what is missing in the entity about risk management, obviously, considering the environment, mission, vision, and culture of the organization. Risk governance refers to the pole of action and processes by which authorities exercised and decisions are taken and implemented, with specific reference to the risk and their implication in the business strategy. So, starting from the know-how and international standard, the best practice and so on, and from professional expertise, we built a tailor-made framework to properly evaluate the risk governance of EOSC. We are investigated 5 different kinds of areas that inspect 5 different features of the risk governance, from the maturity of the governance in charge of risk management activities, moving to performance evaluation of the risk. For each of these areas, we have identified a set of objectives that needs to be reached to be adherent to the best practice of the sector, and for each objectives we have assigned a score from 1 to 5. 1 means almost in line with the best practices, and 5 means that the governance is quite far away from how it should run risk management activities. The analysis highlighted 48 different gaps, and to cover them, we suggested 32 risk governance recommendations, as you can see in the chart. Probably these numbers can mean little to you at first glance, but if you look at the graph on the right, you can see what they reveal. The red polygon represents a picture of how the risk governance looks like now. Visually, far from being a well-shaped green pentagon, which represents the best practice. Therefore, 48 gaps mean that a lot of work has not already been performed on risk governance. At the same time, the chart shows us the forecast on how risk governance will be, how the suggested recommendation brought in this report are implemented. The blue shape that you can see in the slide. Moving from the red to blue, we have 90% improvement on ERM capabilities that need to be supported by a continuous process. obviously. Risk assessment. About the risk assessment, that is charted in the next slide. Thank you. Talking about the risk, high-level risk assessment has been performed in this study. The study identified 13 high-level risk. Most of them, almost 50%, are risk affected the EOSC strategy, mission, vision, and core value. And another relevant portion, 30%, is related to the governance. From our experience and the number of risks identified with the risk assessment in other realities is quite higher than those found here. And the reason it happens is that usually the risk assessment study investigates vertically the entire organization and in all its business processes, one by one. However, in the high number of gaps on governance structure highlighted the urgency in this preliminary phase to focus the analysis on the bedrock of the organizational structure and discover those risks that are affecting the strategy and the governance. However, the analysis also identified a preliminary cluster of reputational, financial, operational risk that is inside the report, obviously. The heat map that you can see in this slide present the distribution of the risk on the basis of the year impact in terms of deviation from the EOSC objectives and their likelihood of occurrence. As you can see on the map, 80% of the risks are critical and positioned in the red area, while the remaining 20% is in any case in the orange area, which means that the criticality is medium high. In this chart, to better explain the kind of result, we reported an example of risk for each category, the blue one that you can see in the slide. Then on the right, the forecasted heat map is reported when the forecasted distribution of the risk after the implementation of the recommendation proposed. We are talking about the future. It is not surprising that the risk profile after the risk mitigation seems not to not be improved definitively. The reason why this happens is that the recommendation proposed are preparatory for the future action that will be studied and applied to each single risk. Therefore, it is more important that ever today, for EOSC create a system that primarily assess all the risks that may lead to a misalignment of the EOSC strategy with its mission and vision. Then, in the next slide, last but not least, in order to be as supportive as possible for EOSC, another outcome of the study was the map of the recommendation and risk over the SRIA. Specifically, governance recommendation and risk were crossed with the outline of the public version of the SRIA document. The goal of this exercise was to produce two orientation map that could facilitate the understanding of the strong relationship between the EOSC strategy agenda and the recommendation and risk, respectively. As you can see from this map, most of the recommendation and risk impact on multiple action areas of the SRIA. Therefore, it becomes extremely important that they are considered by assuring an holistic vision over time and strategic areas across all the EOSC. Then, about the impact of the study, please next slide. I would like to stress what do I think that are the 5 key recommendations that EOSC should take care for the strengthening of the risk management system. First of all, identify and set up as soon as possible a working group dedicated to risk governance that has the necessary commitment and represents a correct mix of skill and stakeholders' interests. with an holistic view in order to be supported by an adequate level of ERM competencies and experiences also in risk management complex organization. Then appoint a figure endowed with necessary skill and expertise, able to guide the project of ERM deployment, and to assure the holistic view over the complexity of all the EOSC ecosystem by assigning responsibilities, managing risk, and proposing solutions. Again, we highly recommend that the main recommendations are integrated in the S.r.l evolution. We are very pleased to announce that this study has been approved by the S.r.l working group, and it will be used as input for their Iron Lady report, as well as the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda report. It will also be used by the EOSC Association by law. Set up and lead a process then that continuously analyze and monitoring the risk that may jeopardize the execution of the strategy and the achievement of the strategic objectives. The process should be also able to design, implement, and continuously monitor a set of strategic KPIs and KRIs. Then, the last one, identify and prioritize the governance objectives to be targeted and design an incremental plan to achieve them, obviously in the field of enterprise risk management. So, next slide. Thank you so much for concluding this lightning talk. We think that the most relevant take-home messages are risk governance as an risk governance first. Sorry. Okay. I missed to. So risk governance as an organizational structure in charge of managing risk from identification to remediation is systemic, which means that it's crossed over different areas within the organization. But it also affects what is outside and around the association, whole the environment. How can this be solved? By following a risk management approach. This study represents for EOSC the beginning of a more wide-ranging and extensive project, also in terms of period of time, that will set up the EOSC ARM framework, and in order to assign rules and responsibility for the risk management and keep the framework implementation under strict and effective control. It's a roadmap that an entire such of EOSC cannot ignore and take out of consideration about us. EOSC risk governance has to be integrated with the overall governance, and it has to contribute in decision-making by reporting evidences, challenges, opportunities, and proposing solutions. Development of risk awareness plan, including education and training programs, dissemination activities, and synergic workshops to support and enhance the culture and skills in risk management inside the association is the third one. So I hope to had the capability to stay in the 5 minutes assigned, and I would like to say thank you very much for your time, and we are ready for any of question and details that you would like to deepen in the next future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Fabrizio. Thank you for a very good comprehensive view in such a short amount of time of what is a long and detailed study. We will have time for questions at the end. And if you could please use the Slido in order to ask your questions. I just put the link in there. Just quickly to highlight something that Fabrizio has said, that if you want to see some of the summary of the risk study, you can find it in chapter 8 of the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda version 0.8, which was announced this morning. So you can find material in there. There was also the point about, is the full report itself available publicly? At the moment, it's being reviewed internally by the executive board, the bylaws group, and so on. But the EOSC Secretariat will, essentially by the end of the project, will publish the results of the studies that we're going to talk about today. Okay, so if there are any further questions, please put them into the Slido and we'll take those at the end. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to move now on to the second study, and by Hans Kahn from Kellen Group. This study completed earlier this year on the legal and strategic advice on the EOSC legal entity membership and governance structure. And in terms of impact, should highlight that if we have a legal entity in existence now for the EOSC Association, it's very much driven by the results of the study that were performed earlier this year by Kellen Group. Please, Hans, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bob, for the introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and also well, thank you to the organization for giving me the opportunity to give a short presentation. If you go to the next slide, before we go into the content, just a few words on Kellen. We are a consultancy company and we basically work almost exclusively for trade associations. And that's also the link with EOSC, the reason why they came to Kellen for the project. So we are very much focusing on trade associations. In Europe, we are based in the Brussels office. On the one hand side, logically, quite active in public affairs, but at the same time as well in parallel, we focus a lot on what we call strategic advice projects, and which is exactly the work that we have done for EOSC. If you move to the next slide. So as Bob already hinted upon briefly in his introduction, so we were really, let's say, called upon to provide strategic advice regarding the governance membership structure for the organization, for EOSC. At the same time, we also included, which is very important under Belgian law, is the steps to be taken into account and to execute and implement on incorporating an organization such as EOSC as a not-for-profit legal entity under Belgian law. This may seem straightforward, but it's actually a quite complex, sometimes even tedious and very administrative work, but it is absolutely crucial as well that those steps are really respected as well in order to ensure that the legal entity is recognized under Belgian law. We also focused on the various membership options, and this is actually in a complex organization like EOSC, where there are various possibilities of, let's say, various levels of membership. It is very much important to keep a good balance of power between all the members and actually the various membership categories. So those elements that we have identified in the report was mainly identifying a couple of scenarios on what could be the consequences if option A, B, C were to be taken, again, taking into account the balance of power within the organization, but also actually the perception on who is in control of the actual work and output of the organization. And that brings ourselves as well to the governance aspects, which is the third point. This is also to a certain extent related to the balance of power, but more on the, let's say, the level of the various bodies. Traditionally, we talk about a board, a general assembly, working groups. Those are very straightforward. The structure options for the various bodies within any given organization. At the same time, within EOSC, there is some additional complexity which was added to it, like, for instance, what should be the role of the member states? What should be the role and the function of the European Commission, who did not want to be integrated into the legal entity as such, but at the same time, some sort of a link should be preserved as well towards the European Commission. So those were all practical elements that we really looked into and actually tried to come up with a couple of recommendations, which of course then in the end had to be taken into account or not by the executive body of EOSC. And if you go to the next slide. And the approach that we've done is, first of all, desk research, and which to a certain extent a lot of these items from a principal point of view is very well known within Kellen, within our organization. At the same time, we had to do some further understanding as well on more the EOSC specific sector, which would have to be reflected within our report, within our conclusions. We had quite some exchange with members of the executive board and also the legal entity task force of the sustainability working group as a sounding board, but also in getting input, getting their preferences for certain directions, certain recommendations. Now, as always, when you speak to multiple people, 20 people or so, it's impossible to take into account every single argumentation, but it was also our role to give a certain weight to the comments that were voiced. And then finally, which concluded, at least from the input stage, our work was a workshop that we organized with the executive board and other invited, let's say, representatives from the organization. This was already due to the COVID situation, and we're talking about, I think, March or April, if I'm not mistaken. That was already done in a virtual way, and in the current situation, it seems like already a very long time ago, but in the end, it was only about roughly 6 months ago. That workshop was also very useful in getting, again, let's say, testing a couple of our recommendations, see what the reaction would be with the participants. And at the same time, we still had a couple of question marks which came out of the desk research, the interviews. And that workshop was also very helpful in getting some guidance on that. Then next slide, please. And the conclusion of the result is very straightforward. It is a report which reflects 3 of the elements which I've included. So really the steps plus a timeline on incorporating a not-for-profit entity, international not-for-profit entity under Belgian law, the various structure options for the membership assessment, and at the same time, the same applies for the governance structure, touching upon the various aspects of the governing bodies and the structure that could be taken into account. And we also opened up a discussion on the potential budget for the running basically the EOSC Secretariat in at least the starting phase. So that is in a nutshell the work that we have done, which was spread over, I would say, roughly 8 weeks, more or less, in the first part of this year.
Okay, thank you very much, Hans, for very brief and to the point presentation. As you highlighted, your work, your study, allowed us to be able to create the EOSC Association on such a tight timeline because of the good guidance given there. If people want to know more about the association, there is, of course, the presentation that was given this morning, and I'm putting a rather long and ugly link to it on the chat. And as well, in section 3.4 of the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda version 0.8, you can find some extra material produced there as well. Okay. Again, the report from Kellen will be published by the Secretariat towards the end of the Secretariat project. Okay. Moving on to our third speaker today, Dario Mangione, who's an independent expert and has been compiling the EOSC glossary for us. So please, Dario, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dario Mangione, and I'm here to give you a brief introduction on the EOSC creation activity supporting the development of the EOSC glossary. May you change the slide, please? Can you hear me?
Yes, we could hear you.
Okay, sorry.
But it's not very loud.
Okay, let me adjust volume. Better now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, but it's still quite low.
Okay. Still low?
No, but there's quite a bit of background noise now when you use that one.
Okay, so that's
okay.
Really
That's good now. That's good.
Perfect. So, as I was saying, good afternoon. I'm here to give you a brief introduction on the EOSC co-creation activity supporting the development of the EOSC glossary. And may you change the slide, please? Thank you. Since after this, the EOSC pilot project, a shared glossary has been identified as a necessity. However, this is an activity that requires dedicated effort and continuous work that, thanks to the EOSC Secretariat cooperation opportunity, became possible. There are many diverse communities involved in the development of the EOSC, a diversity which is both an added value as well as an hindering factor, since not all of them share the same terminology, a problem that is reflected by the documents they produce. For example, as it was pointed out in a comment to the glossary, the quite simple term user can have a very specific meaning within a single community. And even in a community, there can be different viewpoints on the same concept. For example, a platform can be defined based on its functions or on its components. And there are also ambiguous terms like federated infrastructure, as federated can be associated with a distributed infrastructure or with actors that are not organized in a strict hierarchical structure. The point is that even if a concept has achieved a certain stability within a community, a middle ground may be needed if that community has to interact with another one, and the glossary activity aims to create a basis for such terminological standardization. May you change the slide, please? Thank you. The glossary is realized following an open and participatory approach, and it is based on the ISO standards 704 and 10,241-1, with some exceptions due to the evolving nature of the use concept and the impossibility to define a stable set of documents since they are still being published. A brief overview of the main continuous, iterative, and I can assure you very time-consuming processes required for developing the glossary. A collection phase consisting in the mining of terms and definitions from various sources, including the most wanted community inputs. An analysis phase aiming at positioning each concept in a concept system based on its relationships with other concepts. A definition writing and harmonization phase, where existing definitions can be modified or even ad hoc ones can be created, but reuse is always preferred. And a validation phase, based on the substitution principle, consisting in the substitution of a term with its definition in another definition, in order to see if there are inconsistencies, and of course, the community input. In fact, really, the glossary is an inherently collective work, and I will come back to that. Next slide, please. So far, 2 versions of the glossary have been released. The last one, the September version, consists of 107 concepts, of which 27 are still unstructured. Counting contributions also from S.r.l, the landscape, and the skills and training working groups. While a textual version of the glossary is and will be available through the EOSC portal, I would like for the glossary a lot future, maybe just as a keyword retrieval system, even if it's beyond the project declared objectives. In fact, the actual focus is really on the concept system itself. And as I said before, the glossary is just a basis for the terminological standardization, which is really the result of an inherently collective effort, as it thrives on the debate that only a wide participation can provide. Next slide, please. Well, yes, that's it. Thank you for your attention. And of course, you are warmly encouraged to contribute to the glossary development. You can contact me at the email address below, and you can find all versions of the glossary at the link below or on the liaison platform. Thank you. Again.
Thank you very much, Dario. So we now have time for questions. I remind you, please use the Slido link if you want to pose any questions to our speakers. The earlier question that was raised about are the public versions available? Dario has already highlighted where you can find the glossary versions. And as I stated, the EOSC Secretariat will be publishing public versions of the reports from Kellen and AON before the end of the project. Okay. While we're waiting for additional comments to come through, maybe we could start by, I'll start by a couple of questions for our speakers. So the Fabrizio, your risks highlight the work that's been done to understand the state of EOSC at the moment and its evolving parts. But if I recall, you also highlighted that you found some quite good human capital and experience in the European Open Science Cloud through your interviews. Maybe you could expand on that for us.
Yes, I asked the support of Silvia that managed the risk. I think Silvia is, I see Silvia is connected. Silvia, please, can support us to this topic.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Silvia.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Silvia, sì. Oh, meraviglioso.
Hey, this is Silvia. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. During the study, EON has found a human capital very rich in multidisciplinary technical skills, sensitivity to governance issues, passions for the activities to be carried out, and belief in EOSC itself. So we think that the presence of all these, or most of these, are the essential pillar for the construction of an effective risk management. So the EOSC major players who EON conversed with during the study showed an interest and awareness of the importance of the subject that was very high and neutral amongst the relevant player, as well as the relevant skills and experience in different areas of risk management are spread among the stakeholder, and even if they are not systematically introduced in a complete and effective risk governance. But we think that the bedrock of the important skills and interests are currently present in EOSC. So we think that the further implementation of an enterprise risk management framework can be a success for EOSC.
Okay, thank you very much.
I can add only that probably there is you need what we perceived is that you need an orchestration and a new structure in order to go ahead, because some pillar about the culture, the competencies are very strong and are disseminated but not integrated in only one view and one project in order to establish the new governance. And these culture and these competencies are not enough from my point of view, if are not linked in a structured and well-established governance and process in order to establish the rules of the players. But you have a lot of good bedrock that you can use to leverage and to build up.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think what we can take away from your study as well is the guidance on how to organize that that structure as well. So turning to the structure bit, if I can ask Hans. So based on the work you did earlier in the year, the EOSC Association has been formed, it's come into existence. Many of the comments or sort of the recommendations that come from AON are tailored towards or should be managed by the EOSC Association. But for the EOSC Association itself, Hans, what would you see as the single most important thing it should do on the 1st of January 2021?
Sorry, Hans. Sorry, I'm wrong.
No problem at all. I've seen that the statutes have been issued already. So one of the clear points now, if you look at associations in general, is going to be very important in creating added value. Even in these times where we are right now, especially 2021, which announces itself to be quite difficult from an economic and financial point of view, it is first and foremost important that an association, especially a large one such as EOSC, really focuses on the added value it can provide to its members. Because in the end, at a certain point, even if membership fees are kept actually quite low, it is a consideration which always comes into play as well. And that's why this is something that we have seen as well over the years. The fact of just being a member of an association is, for quite some people or companies or organizations, no longer sufficient. They really want to feel some sort of a return. And this also applies even in those cases where the membership fees are rather low. So structure is there. It's really now getting the ball rolling and focusing on the output, the collaboration model as well. Since you have quite some various types of members within the organization, it's trying to get everyone on board and try to give everyone a voice as well in those discussions within the various, be it working groups, task forces, or committees, or whatever name will be given to those platforms.
Okay, thanks very much for that advice, Hans. And I see there's one question on the Slido for Dario. Dario, is there any plans to make the glossary converted into a machine readable format?
Well, as I said, I would really like to, but there are problems to resolve first. For example, right now I have the need to consider more than one preferred term for a concept, which is not in line, for example, with the SCOS standard. I need a more flexible way to structure the concept system before coding the glossary in a logged way.
Okay, thank you very much. We've come to the end of the session. If the participants do have further questions for our speakers, if you put them in the Slido, and we will pass them on to them afterwards and see if we can get them followed up then. And it just remains for me now to thank again our speakers, not only for their presentations, but for their excellent work, which has helped to form the EOSC initiative and its program of work. And we'll close the session there. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you to you.
Good night.
Thank you.